Forest, Dandelion here. Hope everything's well. It's a chilly day in Chimayo, New Mexico. We had some pretty cold weathers. I think it was about 38, 39 degrees yesterday. Hanging out at Jesse and Johanna's. And starting to do some new things with, if people ask me questions, herbal questions, I figure it's better to kind of share the answer, which I would share with them, so that maybe some of you all can enjoy it as well. So today I was asked about urinary tract infections, and I'd just like to share a little breakdown of how I work with UTIs and some options. So I guess we'll give a few minutes for people to join in, and then we'll get into really the urinary system, and then how herbs can affect the urinary system for positive help. A lot of people get UTIs, and I think that there's some basic common understanding of, well, drink cranberry juice and that should make it go away. If you understand the action of what cranberry does on the urinary tract, that can definitely help a little bit, because that would be an insufficient remedy. It's only addressing one part. So I'll give just 2 more minutes or whatever for people to join in, and then we'll get into UTI remedies. This episode of Foragers Broadcast is brought to you by chai, but specifically Felinus chai. Jesse and Johanna harvest a Felinus mushroom, Felinus sometimes pronounced, and they throw it in the crock pot with a lot of water and cook it and cook it and cook it for several hours. And we keep using that mushroom, we keep adding more water, and then they added some chai spices in there, and just super yummy, and a little bit of local milk. It makes a nice morning drink. Hello, Nixopak Photography. Welcome. All right, so let's break this down. So you have the urinary tract, which consists of your, really the first outside part, in a way, is we all have a urethra, right? So your urethra connects to your bladder and your kidneys, and that's basically your urinary tract. Now, a UTI, a urinary tract infection, is a common issue. A lot of women get it, and I believe even men can carry it, but they display no symptoms. So often what can happen is partners will share the UTI back and forth. As soon as the woman gets rid of it, the man may have it. Because what I think the only source of getting a UTI is that you get E. coli into your urethra, which then spreads eventually into your bladder and gives you a bladder infection. So a lot of times it's a main concern because you have an infection that's spreading. And of course, E. coli, sadly enough, comes from feces. So the number one rule for women is obviously don't wipe back to front. Never wipe back to front, because you can get those, the E. coli, right, to start traveling into your urethra, and then from there it goes into your bladder or kidneys. So that's a kidney infection or a bladder infection. So what can be done is you have to think about, okay, it's in my urethra, and urine is really how we want to flush that out, but urine alone is not going to do it. So what is it? It's urine with herbs inside of it, right? Liquid, any liquid, water inside of your body carries chemistry. And so herbs with certain chemistry are going to flush out and treat the urinary tract infection, the E. coli, right? So what do we want to do? We want 3 kind of basic understandings. So I'm going to address this. There's always multiple herbs that you can use, but I'm going to address this based on herbal action, not necessarily which herbs are best. There are no best herbs for any. The best herb that you can take is the one that you have access to, that you're going to take every single day. An herb that sits in your counter or an herb that sits outside is not going to be as effective as an herb that you actually take every single day. But what I like to do for UTIs is think of 3 aspects. And the first aspect is, as we're familiar, a lot of people are familiar, cranberry juice, right? But you don't want some nasty cranberry juice with high fructose corn syrup and artificial colorings and stuff like that. So actual cranberry juice with no added sugar. But what that does is it makes your urethra slippery, right? So cranberry is slightly mucilaginous, and what it does is it makes your urethra slippery so that the bacteria cannot travel further up your urinary tract. So cranberry juice on the regular, maybe 8 to 16 ounces a day, sugar-free, is going to help at least that first level of it not spreading and going deeper into your system. Because obviously this is where a lot of people procrastinate and wait and wait and wait, and then the disorder gets worse, and then they have to run to the doctor, and the doctor gives them antibiotics. So antibiotics will work for urinary tract infection, but they also have a damaging effect. They also kill many of the positive, healthy bacteria that you have in your system, which keeps other microbes in check. So the number one part of your immune system is the bacteria, the microbes in and around your body, and those are what keep everything else in check. So just keep that in mind. So you're drinking cranberry juice, maybe 16, 32 ounces a day, and then you could make any kind of herbal tea which has any aromatic properties, so anything in the mint family, really any herb. Another thing I was thinking of is pine, but you have to be careful with pine because pine is not to be used for pregnant or breastfeeding women. So if you are not pregnant and you are not breastfeeding, you can look to any pine tree, right? That doesn't mean any evergreen, so you'll have to learn the difference between a pine and any evergreen, but most evergreens can be helpful. Some of them, like cedar, can be taxing to your liver and kidneys. Now, that's only if you're going to take it for a long period of time, and in this case, you should be able to clear up a UTI in 3 to 7 days. Nick Sopak says, vitamin C, flavonoids, probiotics. Can you touch on that? Sure. Well, what I'm already getting into is pine already contains more flavonoids than any product you're going to buy, and it's also bioavailable. So instead of buying products, isolated ingredient products, like a vitamin C tablet, I believe that your body knows how to assimilate vitamin C better from the pine tree, which there is also vitamin C inside, and there are flavonoids. So I look to the plants, which are already in a million-year relationship with your body and your neurons and your ability for your body to absorb and assimilate. So I try to stick to plants in their whole form and go from there, and that ends up being cheaper and also I think more effective. So you may hear like, oh well, this vitamin C pill has 20,000 milligrams of vitamin C and your cup of pine tea only has 300. My argument for that is yes, and it's also assimilable and your body knows what to do with it. And just because you're consuming 20,000 milligrams of vitamin C doesn't mean it's assimilating into your body, and most of it's getting urinated out, so it's basically a ripoff for absolutely no reason. So then probiotics, right? I was talking about how the microbes affect our immune system as a whole. And if you want to make your own fermented foods, check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Return to Nature Skills, and my website, returntonature.us. And there I have a whole bunch of videos on how to make your own fermented food. So that will be an important factor. Always make your own ferments. If not, buy them, but make sure they're raw. And even those get flash pasteurized, so you can be killing some microbes. Probiotic pills, again, the same situation. It's thousands and thousands, sometimes trillions of microbes, but that doesn't mean your body is able to assimilate or process that out. And most probiotic pills, 90% of it is dead when it hits your stomach acid anyway, so you're actually not getting very much. Now, probiotic foods are very different. Miso. Jesse was actually telling me how kefir is one of the only probiotics that gets to the intestinal wall. So consider those things. So we always want to look to food and plants directly because we have a symbiotic relationship with those species. And in actuality, the plants are our ancestors and they gave birth to us largely for their own reasons. So, yes, those are helpful. Vitamin C, flavonoids are helpful in this case, but we're going to cover that because we're talking about plants. So we have a tea, right? So take cranberry juice, 64 ounces of, maybe 64 is a little lot. Maybe 30, let's say 32 ounces of cranberry, and that makes your urethra slippery so the infection doesn't spread. From there, I like to use juniper berries because they're very easy. So they have an affinity for the urinary tract. And one way you can tell that they have an affinity for the urinary tract is when you eat juniper berries, you urinate out the smell of juniper. That means there are essential oils within that plant, right? So instead of taking juniper essential oil, which doesn't have all of the other synergistic compounds that juniper berries have, you're considering the whole plant, right? So 20 juniper berries a day for 4 to 8 days, let's say, will also be helpful. So now we have Yeah, Nick, you can always add rose hips to your tea, right? Boil up those rose hips like I was talking about with the Phelinus. Mushroom chai, you can also do rose hips in a crock pot overnight, and then you have, 3 days worth of tea, and then from there you can add in anything like peppermint, or you can add in stinging nettle, peppermint, and those are going to help give the body not only the treatment, the acute treatment for a urinary tract infection, but also the immune healing properties, right? So nettle is good for all people in all times unless you're allergic to nettle. So that will help for any case. So getting vitamin C in your body through rose hips, stinging nettle. Peppermint is, again, an aromatic oil plant, and that's going to flush through your urinary tract as well. Any plant with high levels of essential oils will be processed and flushed through your urinary tract, so that's going to kill those microbes. So when you're dealing with 20 juniper berries, right, 10 to 20 juniper berries, eat those every day. And then also what I find is really helpful is asparagus. Asparagus is also one of those things where if you eat it, your urine smells like asparagus, and that's because there are, again, aromatic compounds that are being flushed through your urinary tract, and as they kill those microbes. So now you have cranberry juice making your urinary tract slippery so that it's not allowing the infection to spread. And then the juniper berry and the asparagus, so eat asparagus 2 times a week, that's going to help flush your system and also kill those infections. Little Fussy Britches says rosemary. That will definitely be helpful. As I mentioned, rosemary is in the mint family, so any aromatic plant is going to go through your urinary tract and kill infection, right? So you essentially are dealing with a urinary infection, and as a result, any aromatic plants are going to help. But my favorite, and I've seen this work, and I've seen this be very effective, and I've recommended it to many people, is you can take, 32 to 64 ounces of cranberry juice a day, drink a tea with, aromatic herbs, immune system herbs, and eat 20 juniper berries a day, and eat asparagus 2 times a week. And within 4 to 7 days, it should be cleared up. You really have to keep it going. A UTI is what's known as an acute condition, right? You have an acute issue. So you're not dealing with maintenance and tonification, right? So, though, in any ailment, you manifest an ailment because you are not tonifying your system enough, right? So if you get to the point of having a UTI, it's because you have, a lack of microbes. It's because you have a lack of immune function in that part of your body, and many herbs and many mushrooms can help that over the long term, but they're not going to deal with the acute bacterial infection. So you often see this with reishi mushroom. People take reishi for colds. If you take reishi mushroom for a UTI, it's not going to be effective. You're not going to see a direct result. It's not for acute treatment. And you can see that in the signature of the mushroom. They don't grow quickly, right? They're not quick growing. They're slow growing. So that's what they do with your immune function over time. So if you're taking reishi, or immunomodulators or adaptogens, they are not for acute issues. They're not for the bacterial infection, but they're going to help support your body. Another thing I want to mention is that asparagus, that genus is actually tied to an Ayurvedic herb called shatavari. So you can also replace asparagus with a teaspoon or 2 of shatavari powder. And that can also help, or shatavari tincture that also tonifies and works on the urinary tract, specifically the female urinary tract and the hormone system. So, obviously if you get your hormone system in check, you get your immune system in check, you will reduce the likeliness of having urinary tract infections. And then when you do, treat acutely with cranberry juice, juniper berries, and asparagus. Those are 3 easy options. So does anybody have any questions on UTIs and healing UTIs, or anything else today? That's all I wanted to basically share, and I thought that would be a little helpful bit. Hey, thanks, The Woven Dream. If I am magic, it is only because you are magic, and you are seeing magic through your perceptual lens. We can only see what we have. We can only observe in others what we carry within ourselves. Nick says, what about apple cider vinegar or, say, propolis? Either of those would be great. Apple cider vinegar can also be helpful, so I like to add apple cider vinegar to herbal teas when I can, even a shot, especially with high mineral plants. Apple cider vinegar synergizes minerals to absorb in your system. it actually alkalinizes them. So when you're dealing with stinging nettle, which has a lot of minerals, if you add apple cider vinegar, you're going to potentiate that. In Ayurveda, that's called an anupan, or a means, or a method, right? Just like if you want to drive it's like a driving force, right? So apple cider vinegar alkalizes minerals. Ghee, or coconut oil, synergizes alkaloids to go into your fat tissue, which happens to be, for example, your brain. So if you're taking herbs for brain, right, brain tonics, if you potentiate it with something like a fat, right, coconut oil, ghee, right, so you take a teaspoon of lion's mane, you take a teaspoon of gotu kola, and then you add, a quarter teaspoon of ghee, and you pour hot water over that, and you stir that around, and then you drink that powder, that sludge. That's going to absorb into your system really effectively. So that's a whole kind of more advanced or intermediate topic of, formulation and then anupan. So, I gave you a kind of simple recipe, and then from there you can always get more complex. So if you had no juniper berries available, but you had propolis tincture, that would work totally fine. Chief Breezy says, cider vinegar is acid only outside of your body. When you take apple cider vinegar internally, it alkalinizes your body. So there are sours that basify and sours that alkalinize your body. They're not all created equally. Oranges acidify your body. Limes alkalinize your body. Apple cider vinegar alkalinizes your body. So not every sour flavored substance is going to acidify your body. So in the case of lime, and I'm forgetting about lemon, I think people say different things. Some people say it acidifies, some people say it alkalinizes, but I know lime does, and I know apple cider vinegar is alkalinizing. Some things that are outside acidic turn the body alkaline, and that's basically called antipathy. Right, so you have sympathy and antipathy, right? So some things like cures like, other things the opposite causes a certain effect. New World Rising Network says, what would I recommend for kidney stones, and what do you think about activated charcoal for detoxing? So let's see. So for kidney stones, any bitter herb, right, flushes the kidneys. So burdock dandelion is a good combo. There's also jopai weed, which is more for gallstones, but I think can help even with that. Along with any stones you have, you are forming a situation where you have likely too much oxalic acid. So oxalic acid is in chocolate, it's in kale, beets, Swiss chard, collard greens, etc. So what you want to do if you're eating salad, spinach is very high in spinach. So if you want to reduce your oxalic acid intake, you should either avoid those foods or at least crush their leaves. You masticate with your hands. So if you smash up the kale greens and you leave it there for some time, you actually oxidize some of the calcium oxalate. So that's very helpful. I should say oxalic acid. It's not calcium oxalate, but it's converted into calcium oxalate, and sometimes that can also cause kidney stones, gallstones, things like that. So you want to avoid foods with high levels of oxalic acid in them, like wood sorrel also has high levels of oxalic acid. So that's first step, and then those herbs I mentioned. And then for activated charcoal, I think activated charcoal is kind of a ripoff. In the sense of it's charcoal. Charcoal comes from fire pits. It's totally easy to get and free. So you can crush any charcoal that you get from a hardwood ash, hardwood fire, and you can also use that. And what that does is that does not target the urinary tract as much as it targets the stomach. So if you have any infection in your stomach, or you have hyperacidity, or anything like that, charcoal powder or charcoal, you could even take charcoal from the fire and just swallow pieces. That can really help as well. Let's see. Yeah, so activated charcoal is okay for detoxing. Charcoal is fine for detoxing if you have a hardwood, a non-poisonous hardwood, right? There are a few trees that are poisonous, so you just need to be mindful of that. Otherwise, charcoal is helpful. It's not necessarily going to directly affect you for a UTI, but it does alkalinize your body, and that can always help. Nick Sopak, better than TV. Thank you, brother. Awesome. This is TV somehow. Bless your vision and teachings. Thank you. Keep the vision strong. Doing what I can. We all got to just do what we can when we can. Nixopoc colloidal silver, I avoid it like the plague. I think most of it is improperly made on the market. Second of all, there's a lot of misinformation about colloidal silver. Specifically, colloidal silver is only showed to be antimicrobial if it is directly applied to the mucous membranes for more than 4 minutes, which means that it's never happening if you're taking it internally and you have a systemic infection. It is not a systemic antibiotic. That is the myth about colloidal silver. I would say avoid colloidal silver unless you're getting it from a really good source, and then only take it for very, very rare acute situations where nothing else is affecting you. What's up, Sunnyside Spam? Yes, good plants, Sunnyside Spam, to add to this. Uva ursi, right, or kinnikinick, is also a very good urinary tract herb, and juniper berry is the one I mentioned. Of course, from there, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of herbs to apply for something like any condition, but specifically, we're talking about UTIs today. So uva ursi helps, right? So what are you looking for as far as quality of plant? What you want is an astringent aromatic, right? If you have an astringent aromatic, that's exactly what cranberry is. That's exactly what juniper is. Those will all help you, right? They will tighten the cell tissue in your urinary tract so that the bacteria and the microbes cannot hide in there, right? And then they also have the aromatic compounds, and aromatic compounds in plants are generally the antimicrobial parts of their body, right? So when you're consuming the part of the plant with antimicrobial compounds, you're then getting that effect. So uva ursi is great. Of course, a real fun thing is that manzanita. Yeah, manzanita is also Archistophos. So Archistophos is the Uva ursi genus. It's also the manzanita genus, and there is a tradition of working with manzanita leaves, bark, twigs for UTIs as well. So that's an interesting thing to know. Sometimes you get cross uses in genus of plants. Not all the time, but sometimes. Yeah, colloidal silver, no. Oregano oil, no. If you want oregano oil compounds, drink oregano tea and put oregano in your food. If you have a very persistent infection, if you have MRSA, if you have SARS, and a tincture, tea, and supplement combination is not affecting it after 7 to 12 days, yes, absolutely start looking to colloidal silver and oregano oil internally before you would take pharmaceuticals. But don't, I was talking to someone. Ooh, Schizandra, exactly. So Schizandra is an astringent and also aromatic herb, right? So Schizandra berry is great for the urinary tract, definitely. And then have that immunomodulating property. They're an adaptogen, so they're going to help with your immune system. They're also going to treat the infection directly. I would even dare to say, Schizandra is not as slippery as cranberry. You can almost use Schizandra in place of cranberry juice, Schizandra tea. That might be as effective if you're doing everything else we mentioned. So for example, essential oils should be a good potential replacement for antibiotics, but tea, tincture, and smoothie powder, etc., should replace the essential oil. Only take essential oils if you really need it and have a dangerous emergency. Sunnyside Spam says, I also think that frequent UTIs give us a reason to question whether or not our partners are compatible with our bodies. That's very interesting. I also think it's about, for example, after sex, you have to urinate. That's what stops women from having UTIs. Your urine is like a flushing mechanism. Of course, when you have sex, you're sweaty, and your E. coli, your fecal matter, can spread around your body when you're having sex. So that can also, the male can get that on their penis, and then they can insert into the vagina, and that can cause a UTI. So, yeah, I can see with the compatibility, but I think there's always kind of some work that can be done. It's not necessarily a sign that you should reject your partner because you're getting UTIs. You should try uva ursi, etc. first. Things like that. But thanks for sharing that, Sunnyside Spam. Very interesting to start churning with the sort of metaphysical background of what does persistent UTIs tell us about our sexual engagement, our partnership engagement, our partnership choice, how we're having sex, how we're engaging them, But then also our diet and our lifestyle and our herbalism and our, sugar intake. And, you know what I mean? You could have the best partner, the healthiest partner in the world, and if you eat nothing but high fructose corn syrup and McDonald's, you're probably going to get, illness. If you blame them, it's great for you. If you blame other people for your problems, it's always can get you this far, but eventually shit turns around. Nick says, what do you think about ozone treatments? I'm not really a big fan of any of this hyper-technological medicine practice. I think that's where we've kind of gone wrong. If I had mold or something, like, if I had a vehicle with tons of mold, I would do an ozone treatment. But I don't think that repeatedly exposing myself to ozone is necessary or healthy. So Elena says, how many times a day and for how long should you take cranberry, juniper, and herbs that you recommended? So I already did answer that, but I will answer it again because you stimulated this wonderful discussion. So I would say 7 to 12 days. A lot of times people stop their protocol as soon as they stop showing symptoms, but that doesn't mean it's out of your body. That means it's starting to retract. So I would say 7 to 12 days on a UTI, situation where maybe 32 to 64 ounces of cranberry, 20 juniper berries, 10 to 20 juniper berries a day, and then asparagus 2 times a week. That usually deals with it in 7 days. In 4 days you'll start feeling better. In 7 days it'll be gone. Keep it up for another couple days, just to make sure it's out of your system. So that's basically that. Does anybody else have any other questions about UTIs or anything they'd like to share or any herbs that they really like for UTIs? Feel free to chime in and join in. Hello, Lolo Sutherland. Many blessings. La 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 la. So today we're going to be working possibly on the cob structure. I really wanted to take you all to show it, but the cell service and the Wi-Fi is so bad I can't really walk around the property so much. The dandelions have all dropped their seed because it rained last night. Also, there's this really beautiful smell in the desert when it rains. You get almost like a creosote smell in the air. It's so nice. The rocks smell. The desert smells so nice when it rains. Sunnyside Spam, thanks for sharing. Thanks for bringing up Uva Ursi. And yeah, it's an important topic, and there's always options. Chief Breezy says, is it best to just eat the berries instead of trusting commercial cranberry juices that is in the grocery store? As long as the berries don't have sulfides, which are often added, or as long as the berries are not heavily processed, which a lot of them are. Ocean Spray owns most of the cranberry production in the United States, and they are definitely using pesticides, so just be mindful and careful of your source no matter whether it's in liquid or not. I tend to like, if you have dried cranberries, eat dried cranberries. I tend to like the cranberry juice because the juice itself has an affinity for the urinary tract more than a dried berry, which has no water value in it, so it doesn't go to your water system as readily. Yeah, a lot of the cranberry juices in most markets are fake and full of sugar, but it's very easy. Santa Cruz or that other juice company. There's a couple organic juice companies that I would go for. So those small bottles, this big, and just get straight cranberry. There's another thing in health food stores, what you can find. There's a pretty good cranberry juice concentrate, and that you just pour into your liquid. You could just water it down and use that as well. So obviously, check your ingredients, make sure there's no sugar and there's no artificial colors or flavorings in the cranberry juice. Otherwise, it's not cranberry juice, it's chemicals that poison you, and that's not juice. So just be mindful of your sources. That's always the case.